Hello, everybody. We are going to dive into Chapter 5, The Director and the Producer. When we see a theater performance, our most immediate connection is with the actors on stage. Just like film, the actors on the screen. That's our most immediate connection. We begin to identify with the characters that they play. We absorb the situations in which these characters find themselves. Behind the performances is the work of another creative individual, the director. The director, with the support of the stage manager, rehearses the performers, coordinates their work with that of others, such as the designers, to make certain the event is performed appropriately, intelligently, and excitingly. The director oversees all of the choices made for a production. They want to create a unified whole under a unified vision, and it is that director's vision. The definition of the director, directly from our textbook. In American usage, the person responsible for the overall unity of a production and for coordinating the work of contributing artists. The director. They're in charge of everything. Everything out in the auditorium, everything on stage, everything backstage, everything in the up in the tech booth. The director shapes a production. There are different approaches to being a director, which we will discuss. We'll look at three approaches, really. Traditional, the traditional director, the auteur director, and postmodern. For the most part, we experience theater as a unified event. Okay, but as pointed out before, theater is a complex art, not involving one or two elements, but many elements: the script, the performance, the costumes, the scenery, the lighting, the sound, etc. These diverse elements, a mixture of the tangible and the intangible, need to be brought together into an organic whole. And that is the responsibility of the director. Frequently, the director chooses the script to be produced. Frequently. I know, working in higher education, that the choice of the script, the decision to direct a particular play would fall back to me as the director. I didn't necessarily need anyone's permission to direct a particular stage play, but I tried to make certain that the plays that I selected would fit well with my audience. You have to know your audience. You have to know who's in your audience. In public speaking, we talk about conducting an audience analysis. Well, in a similar way, I, as a director, would be conducting an analysis on the audience of where I'm working. Is it a college? Is it a university? Is it a community theater? Is it a professional theater? A regional professional theater? So, what is my audience? Is it a very conservative audience, right? or is it a very liberal audience? Think about an audience in small town America, like say a small town in West Virginia, versus an audience in a bigger metropolitan area, right? Like Cincinnati, Ohio, or Chicago, or New York, of course, New York. Um, but those kinds of things you need to take into consideration. Um, I worked for uh, the past 6 years at a college in southeast Kentucky. That it was a small, private, Christian-based college. So they were very conservative. So there were plays that I would have loved to direct, but I knew that I couldn't do that. Um, I didn't want to rock the boat, right? So I was very careful in the plays that I selected. So that's just something to keep in mind. The director is not only in charge of the play they're directing, but most often they have selected that play for production. Um, so the director's attraction to the script and basic understanding of it are very important in launching a production. Once the script is chosen, the actual work begins on the production, and the director needs to know that play better than anyone because actors have questions, designers have questions, the stagehands will have questions. So it's very important that the director, uh, of course, the director is going to read the play. They're going to, but beyond that, they're going to analyze the script. They're going to get very familiar with the script. So when you do a theatrical, the theatrical the theatrical criticism assignments that I have in this class, that is one way to look at that assignment. Is that I'm getting you to read a play and I want your thoughts on the play. You could even pretend, what if I were going to direct this play? Well, what can you tell me about it, right? I want to know your thoughts on the play. And we're going to talk about the theme of that particular play. We're going to talk about the characters. These are all things I want you to write about in that theatrical criticism. But moving on, once the script is selected, the director begins analyzing and preparing the production. And there is no one way a director should go about this. Okay, remember that. There's no one way that is the right way. There are many, many different ways to approach a production, to begin to analyze the script and move into casting and after that, rehearsing. One method of undertaking this task was suggested by Konstantin Stanislavski, who we learned about in chapter 4. In this case, an initial step is to determine the spine of the play. The spine is also known as the main action of the play. The spine is determined by the goal or primary objective of all the characters in the play. So the spine of the drama, or the main action, um, there. Excuse me a second. I've got a cat here. Hold on. Come on. Go. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. Hold on. All right. I had to let a cat out of the room, guys. Sorry about that. The spine of the production. Let's see. Where did I leave off? It's a working hypothesis that gives directors a foundation and a through line on which to base their analysis and their work with the actors. So finding a spine for a play allows the director to understand the action, and it provides a nerve center from which to develop that action. And different directors may find different spines for the same play. That's very important to understand. Pretend for a moment that I'm directing Hamlet at one theater, and you, let's say you're across town, you're directing Hamlet for another theater. Doesn't matter if it's a school or a community theater, just pretend for a moment that you're directing Hamlet. Several spines are possible for Hamlet. Much is going to depend on the period in which the play is produced and on the point of view of that individual director. One spine could be simply revenge. You could approach Hamlet as a director and you could be thinking this is a revenge play. Another spine could be Hamlet's attempt to resolve his inner conflicts, right? Yet another spine could be Hamlet's attempt to locate and expose the duplicity and corruption that he senses in Denmark. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark, right? So varied interpretations are to be expected, and they are acceptable as long as the spine that you choose remains true to the spirit and the action of the play. Is your spine correct? Does it work? Well, that's going to go with how you feel you define success. We can, I could direct Hamlet and it could be heralded in the community, all over town, all over the university, all over the college campus, etc., as one of the greatest adaptations of Hamlet that the audience has ever seen, right? This could be a review. The reviewer obviously liked the production, but what if they don't, right? What if the theater critic doesn't like my Hamlet? I don't know if I've mentioned this previously in class, but if you are going to be in theater, if you are going to work in theater, whether you are working professionally in theater or you do theater as a hobby, let's say, you're involved with a local community theater. It doesn't matter. If you're involved in theater, you need to develop a thick skin. You have to do this. Someone is always going to love your work, and then someone else is going to hate it. So it's something that I encourage early on, and teaching theater in college, I tell students that if they don't know this, if they're not aware, that's something they need to work on beginning as freshmen, because there's a lot of competition now. Let's think about. I digress for a moment, but think about casting. The director casting his production. I wish I could cast everybody. I wish I could do that, but it doesn't work that way. If I have a play that I'm directing, and let's pretend there are 8 characters in the play, and let's say I have 17 people audition. Well, obviously not everyone's going to get cast in this play as a performer. But hopefully those that are not cast are interested in working backstage, in the tech booth, working in design, working in stage management. So there are many, many roles in theater, many different jobs, many duties, many responsibilities. And remember what I've always said from day one, it is the most collaborative form of art that there is. Moving on. So we were talking about the spine of the play, or the main action. Let's look at realism for a moment. At one extreme, we have naturalism. This is an attempt to put on stage exact copies of everyday life. This is sometimes called slice of life drama. Slice of life drama, as though you are taking a slice of life and you're putting it on stage. So, naturalism, putting an exact copy of everyday life on stage. Naturalism refers more broadly to attempts to put a copy of life on stage, as much a copy of life as possible, down to the smallest detail. For example, if we have a naturalistic set on stage, let's say the kitchen, for example, the set on stage is made to represent a kitchen. A performer could actually cook a meal on stage if the script calls for it. Let's say there's the kitchen, you've got a stove, a refrigerator, other appliances, the counter, the range hood, there's a table there. Again, it looks just like a real kitchen. And let's say it's a kitchen in an upscale luxury apartment. So what would that look like? And again, we're going for realism, a naturalistic set. All of the details are so realistic. In the script, let's say it calls for an actor to get up and go to the refrigerator and open the refrigerator and pull out some drinks. Well, the refrigerator needs to work. It's not just a prop. It needs to function. So we have to make sure that the electricity is wired correctly. And we have a fridge, we have a working stove where an actor could boil water if needed. So that gives you a really good idea of what I'm talking about when we say naturalism on stage. Also, there is heightened realism, also known as selective realism. Heightened realism refers to plays in which characters and their actions resemble real life, but there is a certain license allowed for other elements in the plays. The scenery, for example, could be what we call skeletal. Now, what do I mean by skeletal? It means there's not much scenery there. You could walk into the auditorium to see a production and look on stage and go, "Wow, it's quite a skeletal setting. I wasn't expecting that." But you might see that it might have a tree and then maybe a park bench, and that's it, right? That's it. There's really nothing else there. It could be, instead of the naturalistic kitchen that I talked about a moment ago, it could be they simply have a table and chairs and maybe a small table that has a coffee pot on it, right? So it's scaled back, and that's what we mean by a skeletal set. So the scenery could be skeletal. It could be incomplete, or you could say that it's in outline. So the words and the actions of the characters on stage are realistic, even though the set may not be. All art calls for selectivity, and heightened realism recognizes the necessity for the artist to make choices and to inject creativity into the process. Realism itself occupies the middle ground between naturalism and heightened or selective realism. Allegory, I'll give you a few terms I want you to know. Allegory is symbolic representation of abstract themes throughout characters, action, and other elements of a play. So, symbolic representation of abstract themes through characters, action, and other elements of a play. Take the medieval play Everyman, for example. In Everyman, performers play parts with names such as good deeds, You would have a character named Good Deeds, or a character named Fellowship. There's a character named Worldly Goods. So, allegory. Expressionism was at its height in art, literature, and theater during the first quarter of the 20th century, but traces are still found today. Um, Expressionism is the attempt in drama to depict the subjective state of a character or group of characters through such non-realistic techniques, um, like distortion or striking images and poetic language. Take the play The Adding Machine, for example. Excuse me. The Adding Machine by playwright Elmer Rice. The main character, Mr. Zero, is fired from his job. His feelings are conveyed by having the room spin around in a circle. And there's all these sounds in the background, loud sirens and whistles. So, expressionism. The directorial concept. The directorial concept. One way for the director to embody the spine in a production and to implement style is to develop a directorial concept. Such a concept derives from a controlling idea or a vision or a point of view that the director feels is appropriate to the play. It should create, the directorial concept should create a unified theatrical experience for the audience. Okay, moving on. The auteur director I mentioned earlier. The auteur, that's a French term for author. When used to describe a director, it suggests one director who makes drastic alterations and transformations to a traditional script. The auteur director. The play is less about the script, the traditional script, and it becomes more about the director, really, more about all of these changes. The term, well, we're not speaking here of directors who alter the time or place in which the action occurs, but retain the original script. The playwright's words, the sequence of scenes. We're speaking about directors who make more drastic alterations and transformations in the material. In recent years, some auteur directors have directed successful commercial productions on Broadway and in regional theaters across the United States. These productions incorporate some of their unique directorial authoring, authoring in air quotes, techniques, while trying to stay closer to the actual texts. I'm trying to point this back at myself. I like to do that. I say, well, because some students will ask, well, are you an auteur director? And not really. I take liberties. I have taken liberties with many plays, many scripts before. Let me give you an example. I directed an adaptation of Peter Pan for Alice Lloyd College, and I thought it would be cool to use steampunk as my design element. And one of the things I added to the production that's certainly not in the script, I added music. I found steampunk-esque mechanical sounding music that was not copyrighted that I could use in the production. I added a dance number between Peter and Wendy. And I didn't really add a fight scene at the end, but I drastically elongated the fight scene at the end of the production to make it more glamorous, really, to make it. I thought it was a lot of fun. The actors had a lot of fun doing it. So, But I do not consider myself to be an auteur director, really. In fact, I like to stay to the script, the original script, as much as I possibly can. I don't like to change anything that the playwright has done in terms of the script, in terms of the dialogue. Now, with setting, that's different. There are directors that do different things, and that's fine. It doesn't um, make you an auteur director just because you're taking Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream and you're going to put the whole play into a 1970s disco, right? I actually know of someone who did that. So I hope I'm making this clear, the difference between a traditional director and an auteur director. If not, let me know on Brightspace. Okay, let's talk about that. Send me a message. Send me an email. Um, let's see, where do I want? Oh, postmodern director was that third director I wanted to mention. What is postmodernism? Probably the best way to answer the question is historically. The modern period in drama began in the late 19th century with plays like those of Ibsen and Strindberg, who I've talked a bit about. The subject matter of their plays included explicit sexual content. It included social diseases, the subjugation of women, the hypocrisy of religious figures, etc. So the 20th century, therefore, was the period of modern drama. And at mid century, there were people who felt that as advanced as theater had become, it remained bound by the strictures of the text, let's say. Um, Two groups especially advanced these ideas: the theoreticians who propounded the doctrine of postmodernism, and a series of stage directors who embodied postmodernism in their work with a radical, rebellious, free-form approach to theater production. What are the hallmarks of postmodern production? One, which began with Meyerhold, and it certainly continued with Grotowski, was poor theater. Poor theater, Poor. That was taking a part of the text, often called deconstruction. So we're taking apart the text, we're deconstructing it. So portions of a text may be altered, deleted, taken out of context, or reassembled. A second hallmark is the abandonment of a narrative or a linear structure in a theatrical piece. It's an interesting way and there are postmodern directors that I admire. I admire their work. It's not really my cup of tea. If you haven't figured it out by now, I'm much more of a traditional director. And I think a lot of that just came from my undergrad experience, the plays that I worked on, the plays that I performed in, and eventually I started to direct on my own. Um, and but I wanted you to understand those three types of director that the chapter talks about. If I haven't made this clear, as I said before, please let me know, and we'll discuss that. While developing an approach to the play, while developing a directorial concept, the director is also working with the designers on the physical production. The director's concept is established, and the director confers with the costumes, the scene, the lighting, the sound designers, all of the designers, and video and projection designers today is very common. So it's the responsibility of designers to provide images and impressions that will carry out the style and ideas of the director. So understand, it's not just the director and his or her directorial concept, but it's also the designers that are carrying out that mission of the director's concept. During the pre-production and rehearsal period, the director is going to meet with the designers to make certain that their work is on schedule and keeping pace with the rehearsals. Casting. Oh, I think we all know what that is, right? But that's still a definition that you need to understand. I think you know what that is. Casting is fitting performers into roles, and casting in theater. Oh, excuse me. Casting in theater is most often done by the director. So we're fitting performers into certain roles. And do you know what typecasting is? Because you need to know that. When a performer closely resembles in real life the character to be enacted on stage, that's known as typecasting. We also have casting against type, and that's probably a term you're not as familiar with. There are times when a director will deliberately put someone in a role who does not appear to be right for the part. And when I say that, maybe it's a physical representation, right? So they are casting against type. Let me give you an example, one I've often given in class. You're probably familiar with the stage production Beauty and the Beast, or you've seen the animated Disney film or the live action Disney film, perhaps. So you're familiar with Beauty and the Beast. So let's say a director cast me in the production as Gaston. You know who Gaston is, right? He's like the bully character, big guy, strong, really good looking. Well, I don't see a director casting me as Gaston, and here's why. I'm not that big. I'm relatively thin, and I'm about 5'7". So, physically speaking, directors are going to go with casting someone bigger. That if you go with traditional casting, if you're casting against type, then okay, look at Charles Mullins, right? let me read for the part. But so that's what I'm talking about, casting against type. Now, if I were cast in Beauty and the Beast, I'd probably I'd probably play the candlestick guy, Lumiere, right? Lumiere is his name. All right, so, but I hope that gives you an understanding of what I'm talking about. Okay, there is typecasting when someone always gets cast as, say, the old man, or they always get cast as um, um, a funny bumbling idiot character or something. It's typecasting, and we have casting against type. Um, Blocking. Blocking is the pattern and arrangement of performers' movements on stage with respect to each other and to the stage space. And blocking is generally set by the director. So blocking is deciding when and where performers move and position themselves on stage. If I'm doing blocking during one of my early rehearsals, I will tell an actor, okay, on that line, you're going to cross downstage right, and you're going to deliver that line. Then you're going to pause. You're going to say your next line, and then I'm going to have you cross to center stage, right? So the directors block the entire productions. They tell the actors where to move, where to go, when to stand, when to sit, etc. At a certain point, the actors will be what we call off book, meaning that they have memorized their lines completely. So now we are off book. You no longer need to hold that script on stage. You know your lines. Something else I'll mention that I think maybe I hope I'm not repeating myself, but it's really important. Throughout the entire rehearsal process, the director needs to make certain that the performers are realizing the intentions of the playwright. that they're making sense of the script, that they're bringing out its meaning. That's one of the most important things a director can do. That's why we have notes. We have notes, and we go over those notes at the end of a rehearsal, and we talk about it. Sometimes I meet with actors one-on-one just to talk about their character and make sure that they understand the production, that they understand what it is that I want, and that they understand the directorial concept. A tech rehearsal is a term you need to be familiar with. A tech rehearsal is one that focuses on running through the production with scenery, props, lighting, costumes, sound for the first time. So we're working through all those technical elements, and we're making sure that everything works the way we want it to. That's a tech rehearsal. It's a run through, right? It's a run through of the show from beginning to end with all the props and scenery and all the technical changes. So a tech rehearsal. Dress rehearsal. I'm sure you've heard of this before. Even those of you that have done a church play when you were a kid, you probably had a dress rehearsal. This is the first full performance of a production before the play goes to the public. Dress rehearsal. And normally we have several dress rehearsals, okay, before we actually open the show. So just after the tech rehearsal, we have a dress rehearsal, and it's performed. A dress rehearsal is performed as though an audience were present. Okay, that's something that makes it different from the tech rehearsal. In case you were wondering, there's no stopping and starting, not during a dress rehearsal. During a dress rehearsal, we are pretending as though we are really doing it in front of the public. So if you mess up, you better fix it. One function of the dress rehearsal is to give everyone concerned, the cast, the crew, a sense of what the finished performance is going to be like. A preview is a try out performances of a production before an audience. So we might do a preview. We might discover which parts of the play aren't really working. Are there last minute changes that I need to make? For this purpose, there's most often, but not always, a period of previews, or we can call it a tryout. Sometimes it is called a tryout, when the director and the performers, again, we figure out which parts of the play are working, which aren't. The director and the performers find that one part of the play is moving too slow. They know this because the audience members that have come to the tryout are just not, they're just not into it, right? They're not laughing when they should be, and we study the audience, right? And we can learn from that. The stage manager I've mentioned previously, and that's an important piece of a production. The stage manager is the right hand of the director. They're a key collaborator. They especially during rehearsal. Stage managers practically run the rehearsal process. Yes, the director is in charge, but the stage manager, they're responsible for everybody, getting everybody together, keeping people in order. It's just a very important role that sometimes many will fight for in college and university theater. I try to give everybody a shot at it. It's like giving someone a management position, and it's something that the responsibilities of the stage manager vary depending on the type of theater, and it can also vary from director to director. But in commercial theater, it's important to realize that stage managers and actors are members of the same union, and that's the Actors Equity Association, the AEA, reflecting the close work stage managers do with performers. A dramaturge, I believe I've mentioned previously, but that term comes up again in Chapter 5, so please know that term as well. The individual who works on literary and historical issues with members of the artistic team in a theater production. That is the dramaturge. Or literary manager. Sometimes they're called a literary manager. The dramaturge will work on new plays, brand new plays. They work with playwrights on developing scripts. They identify significant plays from the past that may have been overlooked, preparing material for teachers whose students will be attending the performances. They write articles for the programs that are distributed, to the audience when they come to see the show. So, moving on from the director, I want to talk about the producer. And on page 122 in the textbook, there's a great hierarchy there on page that shows how the director's at the top, and we have all of these positions that fall under the director. That gives you a really good idea of all the different responsibilities, all the different jobs in theater there on page 122. So a producer, in American usage, the producer is the person responsible for the business side of a production. That includes raising the money, for the production. A managing director, another term I want you to be aware of, a managing director in nonprofit theater organizations, the individual who controls resources and expenditures. In nonprofit theater, the person with many of the same responsibilities as the producer is called the executive director or a managing director. On page 124, take a look at that hierarchy there as well. We can see those that we see the producer at the top and those positions that fall below the producer. Front of the house is a term reoccurring in Chapter 5, but I just want to make sure you know what that means. The front of the house is the portion of the theater reserved for the audience. Sometimes we just simply call it the house. So that's the auditorium. That's where all the seats are, the front of the house. Another great chart on page 126 showing the organizational structure of a non-profit theater company. So those, the organizational structure on page 122 for the director, page 124 for the producer, and the board of directors, a non-profit theater, there on page 126. That's really good information. Looks like we're going to wrap up Chapter 5 now, and I will next we go into the designers. So that's going to be fun. We're moving along. Next we have Chapter 6, scenery. So Chapter 6 we'll be discussing scenery. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is the director and the producer. So I will see you on Brightspace. Everyone have a great day, great evening. Happy Super Bowl weekend.